السلام عليكم.
That's good.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا وحبيبنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن استنى ودعا إلى سنته إلى يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Let's begin today, inshallah, with Surah Al-Fatiha. Because I want this to be I want everybody to feel comfortable in today's session because we got to dig a little bit deeper. And there's also going to be things that I say that are a little bit deeper. So I want us to just start by starting how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts. And so we'll read Al-Fatiha together, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawm al-Din. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. So Bismillah. So I want you to just take a second and ground yourself and bring your entire focus to where we're at right now. Because the concept of worth is something that is deeply personal. It's not, what gets said here is a drop in the ocean. The true, if you want to get something out of it, you're going to have to do the work, right? It's not going to be today's going to be much more practical as well, much more understanding ourselves, our biology, the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, and how that is a hindrance to a certain life that we want to live. So you have to bring kind of your full focus here, and inshallah just center it around Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make an intention that everything that you learn today is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything that I say today is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and nothing else. And that inshallah that there is barakah in this experience together. So I want to just give the blueprint of what we're trying to achieve in these 3 weeks, right? Last week, we did the power of purpose, right? Today is about finding your worth, and next week is about purpose and action, right? Just so that your mind follows consistently with what we're doing. Last week, who can give me a summary of what we did? What was the main lesson from last week? All right, you're hammering something. So what was the lesson? What's the purpose that we said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us for? In aggregate. How many people were here last week? All right, you guys don't remember?
To worship Him.
Okay, to worship Him. And what was the main form of worship that we spoke about? Salah. Okay, being the anchor. And salah then encompasses that you actually have to understand what you're saying, right? You have to understand the Quran for the salah itself to become even more meaningful, penetrate into your soul. So we spoke about the power of purpose. Today we're going to go into I think the other terminology was unveiling your worth. There is a deep connection in understanding what the purpose of our creation is. In aggregate, we said aggregately, it's to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But now individually, what's our individual mission on this earth, right? Each of us is given a unique mission, a unique purpose. How do we actually bring that to light? How do we identify that for ourselves, and what's stopping us from identifying that? That's what we're going to do today. And next week is to take all of that and inshallah put it into action for yourselves as individuals. But let's go into just a recap because it seems some people weren't here. So we said salah, right? Salah was the anchor of why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, and we gave an analogy of hammer and nail, right? The hammer is something that the purpose of it is to pound or use blunt force to hit an object, right? And nail is to connect two objects together. we said if both of them did not fulfill their purpose, they would not work together, right? So you wouldn't have walls, you wouldn't have buildings, you wouldn't have anything that came together in a legitimate way. So we said if you flipped it upside down and you saw a nail starting to hit a hammer into the wall, you said that would not make any sense and it wouldn't do anything. So if we're not fulfilling our purpose, we're just like a nail hitting a hammer, nothing's happening. So if our purpose is to worship Allah, and our purpose, the definition of that purpose, the anchor of that entire purpose or that entire worship sits on salah itself, because that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us we can find success in. It's the only way for the believers to find success is in salah, where they have khushu'. They're concentrated on Allah in that salah. Then you're like a nail hitting a hammer. So you have to get that conceptually and spiritually right now to understand everything else that we're going to go through for the rest of the week, for the rest of the series. So, I started, I think, last week with the question, how many of us wake up in the morning and feel like we're fulfilling our purpose, right? We had a couple people raise their hand and say, yeah, I'm doing that. I would venture to guess the majority of us do not wake up in the morning and actually feel like we are fulfilling what Allah created us for. Right? Because our life is stacked with all kinds of other things that we're doing, right? And it's very hard to bridge the gap between, am I actually doing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put me on this earth to do, or is there something more that I should do? Is there something more that I'm meant to do? And there's that burning feeling inside. And many of us also just have a life that's very stressful. Like, we don't feel like we have even a space or energy to step back and think about, well, yeah, what is my purpose? Like, can I actually spend time thinking that there's something more than what I'm doing every single day, the grind that I'm in, the rat race that I'm in? Is there something more to that? We don't have the ability to step back. So here's an ayah that very clearly shows the power of Salah, the power of Quran, the power of connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what are the real world implications of not doing it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا وَنَحْشُرُهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ أَعْمَى. This is at the end of Surah Taha. Okay, Surah number 20. Allah, who can read that in English?
But whoever turns away from my reminder will certainly have a miserable life. Then you will raise them up blind on the day of judgment.
That's harsh.
Oh, yeah.
A miserable life.
Oh, yeah.
Who here feels, and again, safe space. There's a lot of things I'm going to say that are very personal. So this is a safe space for us to come together and be vulnerable. How many people feel miserable? Yeah? It's okay. There's definitely been times in my life where I felt absolutely miserable. I'm okay saying that. It's only through those times that then you learn and understand what actual contentment looks like. If you never felt miserable, you never know what it means to not be miserable, right? All of us are living this facade of a life thinking that we're not miserable, but in reality, we just don't want to accept it. We don't want to say it. We don't want to acknowledge it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying is when you strip yourself from your purpose, you will have a miserable life. A life that you feel is so constricted, like you can't break out of it. You just don't feel like you can breathe. You're suffocating. Even though you may live in mansions, you may live in open space, and yet you feel suffocated. So when you feel that, I want you to step back and ask yourself, how connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are you? And the reminder of Allah. Here the dhikr takes three forms. One form is salah, which is the ultimate form because it connects all forms of dhikr in one action, right? You're prostrating, you're making sujood to Allah, so you're physically in submission to Allah, but at the same time, you're reciting the dhikr of Allah. Inna anzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun. We're the ones that sent down the reminder, the Quran, and we're going to protect it. But it's also the actual dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name. Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. The entire salah is an amalgamation of all of the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He's given us as a tool to connect with Him on a one-on-one basis. So when you reject that, when you turn away from that, when you neglect it, when you forget it, then you're just a nail hitting a hammer into a wall. It doesn't do anything. It defeats the purpose. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says something here. We will raise them up blind on that day. The ayah that comes right after it is that this person that was raised blind on that day, he'll ask, قَالَ رَبِّ لِمَ حَشَرْتَنِي أَعْمَى وَقَدْ كُنْتُ بَصِيرًا. Oh Allah, why did you resurrect me blind, but I could see? Like, I could see the blue, I could see the screen. And yet I'm blind on the day of judgment. I wasn't blind in the world. قَالَ كَذَلِكَ أَتَتْكَ آيَاتُنَا فَنَسِيتَهَا وَكَذَلِكَ الْيَوْمَ تُنْسَى. أعوذ بالله. He said, because I sent you my signs. I sent you my ayat. I sent you every single opportunity I could to just pull you back to me. Every single test that you thought was something pushing you further away from me was actually me trying to pull you closer. بس نسيتها. You forgot it. It's not that you just neglected it. Forgot means that you knew it. Forgot means that it was something known. But you forgot it. I forgot it. وَكَذَلِكَ الْيَوْمَ تُنْسَى. And on this day I'll forget you. أعوذ بالله. May Allah protect us from that. May Allah not make us among those who are forgotten by Allah. That's why salah is your anchor. That's why the Quran is our anchor. Because it is the opportunity we have every single day of our life to connect to the one who created us. And when we turn away from that one-on-one, right? Think about our just normal life. Anytime we're invited to have a one-on-one sit-down with somebody who we think is important. One-on-one sit-down. Maybe it's your manager, your CEO, maybe it's this imam, a very famous imam, mashallah, that you want, and they come and tell you, I want to sit down with you personally. How special will you feel? What are the lengths that you and I would go to make sure that we don't miss that meeting? And yet, brothers and sisters, every single day, Allah, the most powerful and important being to ever put us into existence, is telling you you have a meeting with me. And we turn away from it, or we hurry through it, or we don't even realize what we're doing in it. We don't realize what we're saying. We don't even realize what the conversation, the exchange is. So then it's not far-fetched to think that when our life feels constricted and miserable and dark and suffocating, that the only makhraj, the only way to release ourselves is the inshirah to Allah, is the expansion of the chest that comes from the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبِ. Is it not only with the remembrance of Allah that your hearts, your souls will find serenity, clarity, connection, tranquility? So I'm not going to keep preaching, but this is why it's so important. I'm not stressing it from just a purely spiritual level, but I'm telling you that the outcome of your life, the real world that you think is important, will change the moment you connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now let's go into our worth. So who can read me some of the definitions I found on the Merriam-Webster? What are the 4 definitions of worth?
Monetary value.
Monetary value, okay? What else?
The equivalent of specified amount or figure something measured by its qualities or by the esteem in which.
Yeah, the value of something measured by its qualities or by the esteem in which something.
Yeah, and it got cut off.
Yeah.
Moral or personal value.
Wealth, riches, merit, excellence. So this is everything that the general population defines worth as, right? Where do you think you and I get our worth from? From Allah? Why do you feel that? Why do you feel that?
There's a lot the answer. I thought worth was given to us by other people and like how well we contribute to their lives.
Okay.
Like, you do a whole lot for your family, you do a whole lot for your community. Your worth is then like risen in the eyes of other people. Or like definition one, you make a whole lot of money, you're worth a whole lot.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, that is the.
Like, how do we know, like, because we don't know Allah. Like, I mean, he knows our worth, but we don't know the worth he's given us.
Oh, we do though. And I'll explain why.
What I think about is this idea of when you do anything good, it's because Allah wills it, and it's good from Him. And then when you do anything bad, it's like from the nafs, or your include on it. But He still allows it. But by that definition, then you can't really do anything good without it being from Allah. So that cannot really give you the worth. But the fact that the one who you cannot provide any need to, like the Lord of all creation and everything, that He loves and cares about you, and just the fact that you turn to Him, like that is what gives you worth, because it's the one who owns value over everything and defines value for everything, who says you are the best of creation.
So if we're not worth anything, right? Let's say we don't know what our worth is, right? We don't know what worth Allah puts in us. Why are we still here?
Because he wants us to worship him.
But if you're not if you don't think you're worthy, right? If you don't think you're worth anything, or you don't believe that you know what your worth is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning that then there is no thabit, there is no concrete distinction between whether this human being is actually worth staying alive or not, because the worth is unknown. But why are we still here then? Why not then replace us with something that is worthy, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala very clearly tells us, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, that we have indeed honored the children of Adam alayhi salam. And honor, takreem, is a level of status. You're not going to, you can't, if you're not even at the base level of worthiness, right, of worth anything, then takreem is the absolute highest level that you can get to, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that the children of Adam have karama, they have honor, which also then necessitates the generosity and mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if we're defining our own worth, right, because this is now the definition of worth. If we define the self-worth, and we define it through the exchange of transactions from us as human beings to other human beings, and say, if I'm adding value to other people's lives, I'm worth something. But if I'm not adding anything to anybody else's life, then basically I'm worthless. Right?
Yeah.
Logically speaking.
Yeah, you got that definition from me, and I don't really have like a whole.
No, it's fine. I'm not even talking. I'm just talking to you because it's not. So what I'm saying is, this is part of the challenge that we have in the materialistic world, where we don't even realize it. we have now started to define ourselves in the same way we define things. Things that are created by human beings. So we've started to look at ourselves as human beings in the same terms of like, well, what are the qualities that I have that would make me worthy? Like, and I just had this conversation with somebody, and it's extremely sad that somebody doesn't think they can go make friends with anybody else because they don't think they can add value to that person's life. So they stay alone. So then I asked the question, well, do you think that you have value to your parents? No, not really. I think I just smooch off of them. So we've translated the definition of our own self-worth, our own existence, in terms of I have to be productive and add value, and if people don't see value in me, then I'm not going to see value in myself. So we've immediately stripped our connection to value from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And now we've attributed our actions, because guess what? All of us have sins, all of us have mountains of mistakes. If that was the definition Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used as worth, then why not just get rid of this worthless thing and replace it with something that's more worthy? Which is the same way that the angels responded to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when said, أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءِ وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. That they sat there in astonishment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, I'm going to put a representative of me on earth. And they're like, but this creation does all these wrong things. They do all of these bad things. They spread corruption, they spill blood, and they turn to the positives that they have. All we do is worship you. We just glorify you. All we do all day, every second of our existence is exalting you. Why in the world would you put a creation that would go do all these wrong things? They're worthless. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. I know something that you don't. And the next thing that He did is عَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. The next thing He did is He gave our Father the ability to learn. The ability to learn. So one of the most powerful tools that we have as a human being is our ability to adapt, to understand and learn from our mistakes. What was the first thing our father and mother did when they were given all of paradise?
You made a mistake.
They went and made a mistake. فَعَصَى آدَمَ رَبَّهُ ثُمَّ غَوَى. Right? Adam alayhi salam, our father, the first thing he did, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't come near this tree. لَا تَقْرَبَ هَذِهِ الشَّجَرَةِ. Don't come near the tree. And then I have it in another slide, so I'm getting ahead of myself. فَوَسْوَسَ إِلَيْهِ الشَّيْطَانِ. So then the shaitan whispered to them. And he said, هَلْ أَدُلُّكَ عَلَى شَجَرَةِ الْخُلْدِ وَمُلْكٍ لَا يَبْلَى. Should I guide you to a tree of immortality and to a kingdom that will never fade, will never go away? So think about it. He used our own desires against us. But He started with our mother and our father. So they had all of Jannatu Aden. They had all of the gardens of Eden to go do what they want to do. And Allah told them, just don't do this one thing, this 0.10111% of all of what you have, don't go do it. And they did it. So if he didn't have knowledge, if he didn't have the capability to learn from the mistake, then we would be worthless. So that's what we have as a human being, is our ability to adapt and learn from the mistakes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already inspired, because He says all of the children of Adam are khatta'in. All of you are going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes. That's what it is. It's the baseline of our existence. But the best of you, the best of those who make mistakes, the best of those who sin, are the ones who return to Allah. So our worth is not in our mistakes. Our worth is not in our lack of value or productivity to the world, to the system that has been created that treats us like manufactured parts off a conveyor belt. You are worthy because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen you to be worthy. Because if you weren't worthy of Allah's mercy, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be given chance after chance after chance for you to call upon Him. Why waste time? Just put a creation that's going to sabbih bihamdik wa yuqaddisu lak. Put a creation that was created just to worship Allah, not ever make mistakes. And yet we're here. So then I want to show you something. Can you guys see that? That's what I woke up to today. Wells Fargo. It's embarrassing. I'm only sharing this with you. I'm only sharing this. It happened. But guess what? It hasn't happened to me in 20 years. Because I was obsessed to never let this happen. I was obsessed to never let there be an inch. It always has to be, right? What do you hear? 6 months? But then this now happens on a regular basis, and I don't feel bad. I'm not zakat eligible. I'm good. Okay, I'm just showing you this is my operating budget, and it goes below zero, and then I have to replenish. But that's because I'm an entrepreneur now, and money isn't printed like it used to be, right? But what I'm saying is I don't define myself. This doesn't hurt me one bit. If I would have gotten this 5 years ago, I would have been crushed. How many people committed suicide at the crash of 2008? How many people threw themselves outside of buildings because their entire market crashed? This doesn't scare me because I don't define my worth by this. That's why I can show you. I have zero shame in having zero. Actually, it's negative. I cut it off. It's like negative 600, right? But that doesn't define me anymore. I can care less about it. As long as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala still calls me to wake up and prostrate to Him, I feel good. And I'm not minimizing. Alhamdulillah, I've seen a lot of money. It doesn't scare me because I know that Allah has also endowed me with skills where tomorrow I can pick up the phone and start doing something else if I wanted to. But I don't, because I think showing people that they're worth more than what the system is telling us you are worth is a much more important endeavor to be on, right? So this is the worth that people want you to define yourself by. That you got to kill yourself so you don't see zeros before the numbers, you see the zeros after the numbers. Yeah, that's nice for a while, but there's still a lot of emptiness because the expense at which you get to the zeros after, if you don't do it in the way that we're talking, where you're constantly dedicating yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you're constantly checking yourself to make sure that you're going back and saying, Ya Allah, this is all for you. This is all from you. This is all going back to you. If it's a means, grant me the means. If it's a means to take me away from you, take it away from me. Constantly rethinking that this does not define your worth. Okay? So why can't we get out of that? Why can't we get out of the fear that does not define our worth? Why do so many people actually worship money?
You can't see God. So I think it's like if you could see it in front of you, it's like you wouldn't understand if God was like somewhere next to you. I think it's a disconnect that causes you to forget.
Can you see $1 million?
Inshallah.
That's what I'm saying. But you're working to it. You see what I'm saying? Like I don't see $1 million, but you're putting in a lot of effort to get to a thing that's a figment of your imagination until it's real.
We can see it around us. You can see signs of Allah around you, but you can't physically see Allah around you. You can see that concept.
Okay. So what is this? What's this part of the brain? Yeah.
It's a macula.
Are you gonna be?
Where your eyes are most terrified or most happy. It's triggered by your past traumas and your experiences. Basically shapes your experience and connect with all other parts.
Just make it easy on us, sister. Make it easy on it. Give me one phrase that defines
Sorry.
what this.
This book
Uh,
puts a post-it note to whatever you're seeing, so if you're seeing something that tells you, oh, this is making me happy right now, I like this.
Okay, so emotion
Right.
controls emotion. You were gonna say something too, right, sister? Right here.
Oh, yeah.
How are you gonna define this?
Basically, that's like the center of the brain for mostly like anger and fear, and like
Okay.
generally emotions, but like more specifically like intensely like anger and fear.
Okay, so what about the medulla oblongata? I had to watch that video today when I was doing this. I hope I'm not too old. Has anybody watched Waterboy? Okay. I definitely now, alhamdulillah, graduated into old time. Okay. I'm not gonna try it. I do. So I see white hairs somewhere. Okay, guys. I know you guys have seen it. Amygdala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us with a very, very powerful machine that is more powerful than any other machine that exists on the face of the earth, right? And He put in that machine something that will constantly work to keep it alive. This machine only functions to keep you and I alive, right? It's all about survival. And this little red thing called the amygdala, so we're talking about emotions, we're talking about fear. Why is fear such an important component for a machine that is working to keep you alive?
Because it deters you from things that could kill you.
It stops you from the things that may kill you. So you're in constant awareness that like there is a high sensitivity in this specific area of your brain that protects you from dying. So any loud noises, you're on guard. Your nervous system starts to react because the amygdala is firing on all cylinders. It's important to understand this because sometimes we act and we don't know why we're acting. But you're going to see that this little red thing, this very small thing in this beautiful machine that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, عَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا, it all was in here. It was all in here. And yet, look at what the shaitan said to Adam. Shall I show you the tree of immortality? So immortality means what?
You never die.
You never die. So if our amygdala is created to keep us alive, that's all that it functions as. It's just constantly firing to protect you from dying. And the shaitan is coming to our father and saying, hey, let me show you how you never die. Just eat from that tree. And that's where he went. Alayhi salam. And there's something deeply rooted in us that we can't just change like that. We have to understand it and understand the effects of it on our daily basis. How does the amygdala come to light when you probably are saying, but I'm so safe, like there's nothing that scares me? How many people looked out of their window today and it's like, man, it's snowing, that's dangerous, and you hesitated? Did anybody hesitate? Yeah, you hesitate. You're like, yo, if I go out in the car and it slides, my parents are gonna kill me, right? Yeah, okay. So that's his amygdala firing. But I'm sure all of you, the moment you saw white, something triggered. It's like, okay, is the risk worth is the reward worth the risk? Should I leave and go do this? Is this guy gonna just absolutely ruin my night, or is it gonna be beneficial? So you made a cost-benefit analysis. But it's important to understand immortality, because this is how it shows up in our life. I can't do it. I'm not worthy. I must be perfect. I must not make a mistake. I'm not good enough and nobody loves me. How often do you hear that?
Every day.
Where?
In my own head.
You say that to yourself, right?
All the time.
And sometimes we go even worse. Like Sometimes we say things to ourselves that if somebody else said it to us, we would be extremely offended by it. And we'd probably fight. But every single day you go by and you say, you piece of crap. Why are you even getting out of bed? You're like, you just made that sin? Like you're a worthless, you're going to go and pray? You're going to go to a masjid? Come on. Who do you think you are? There's constant thoughts. And especially when you start thinking about doing something different. Something that maybe gets you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maybe puts you out of this zone where you think that, you're okay, you're safe, and you step out and you try to make a change, immediately this voice starts yelling at you. Like, stop. That's too scary. You can't do that. You're going to fail. It's absolutely impossible. Don't ever think that. It's because your amygdala is firing. It's trying to tell you, like, hold on. I've seen this story play out. It doesn't end well. So I'm going to protect you from yourself. And so you create a critic. You create a critic that has a very loud noise, and a lot of times it mimics the same voices that we heard when we were kids as well. Right? Like, don't go near that table. It's going to fall on you. No, don't pick up the kid. He's going to hit the chandelier. If you were raised in like an Arab household, I don't know what this is. That's how you, but every single day, right? No, don't. That risk is too big. You're going to lose everything. So we're constantly bombarded with these thoughts in our minds. And so there's this amazing book, actually multiple books, that Muhammad Gaudat wrote. Has anybody heard of Muhammad Gaudat? Okay, so the person who answered the brain question. There you go. All right. So we got to see what kind of chops we got over here. So Muhammad Gaudat is an Egyptian who was also the chief business officer at Google X for many years. One of the, he was at the forefront of some of the most innovative products in our history, right? And his son one day died at the age of 21 from like a routine surgery. I think it was like appendicitis or something, and the surgeon, it should have just been something easily fixed. Surgeon botched a few things, cut a few arteries or something, and then he died on the table at the age of 21. And this man who was printing money lost everything, like meaning emotionally just rock bottom. And so he quit, Google, he quit everything, and he got on a mission of trying to figure out how to solve the problem of happiness. And he went about it from an engineering mindset. So he actually built an equation and he studied the brain. And so the conclusions are very interesting, and I think it helps us understand ourselves a little bit better. So to me, I don't like the word happiness. I'm also doing some research in the Quran on when does Allah use the words in Arabic that would potentially be translated as happiness. And it's very limited to nothing that actually gets you the true objective that you're searching for. What's more important is itmi'nan, contentment. Being content in your heart is an objective. But anyways, we'll come out with that. So he says happiness is greater than or equal to your perception of the events that happen in life minus your expectations on how life should have been. So think about it. All of us have expectations. Every single day we drown in expectations of ourselves, of each other, of our partners and spouses and children and friends and parents and all kinds of things. Right? Even expectations for this. You'd say you want to come here and you're like, you want to make sure you have a seat, that seat is comfortable, that nobody's sweating, that it doesn't stink, there's a great ambiance, blah, blah, blah. You have expectations. What he's saying is actually happiness is found when you bring those expectations to a baseline. And that the perception of the events that happen in your life are at the same level. So you almost negate it, negate the expectations, and you'll be happy. So what's a practical example of that? Let's take coming here, right? Nobody thought it was going to snow. So your expectation was like leading up to this week, like Thursday's gonna be a great day, roads are gonna be cleared, weather's gonna feel nice, I'm not gonna have any issues or challenges coming here. Come 6 o'clock, your perception of snowfall now could have been like, oh my God, this is now going to ruin the entire event. Like I can't leave my house. Nobody's going to come. Nobody's going to show up. And so you start to become unhappy with just your expectation of what's going to happen. I think I even texted Othman. I was like, hey, is this thing going to get canceled? Like, it's snowing. I don't think people are going to show up. So if my expectation was like nobody was going to be here, and I came and nobody was here, then okay, well that's what I expected. But if I expected the room was going to be filled and then nobody was here, guess what I'm going to feel on my way back home? I'm going to be very unhappy. I was like, what? I'm never coming back to Adams again. Man, this Pablo thing's a joke. I'm going to go back, right? But think about how many times that happens in your day. When you, because the amygdala has a bias to negativity. Our brains have a bias to negativity because it's the thing that protects us. That's what it thinks. So if you're going to assume the worst of every situation, you're going to be protected. That's what your brain is telling you. Now what that does is now it tells you that everything in the world is negative. Even you. And so once you start to flip and catch these thoughts that come to your mind that everything is going to be wrong, everything that you think is possible and could work out, you're already assuming that it's not. You've now created a distortion in your mind that actually creates a situation where you're just completely unhappy with yourself. Or you're unhappy with the person that you were expecting something from, or the situation you were expecting something to happen. So think about how many times in your life you just recycled a negative thought because it didn't meet your expectations. And now imagine if you just changed the expectation. Would you be okay? Would you have a better outcome? Yeah, it sounds easy, right? But the hardest thing to do is to recognize those voices. So what are the 6 grand illusions? Okay? And before going into this, it's important to say that your brain, and there's been studies and counter studies and all kinds of things, but let's just say 10 minutes. Okay, let's just say that your brain creates 12 to 60,000 thoughts every single day. 12 to 60,000 thoughts. Some of us really think, and some of us are like, okay? 70% of those thoughts, 70 to 80% of those thoughts are negative. 70 to 80% of our thoughts are negative on a daily basis. Again, to protect us, supposedly.
Does it depend on what we're doing? If we're like...
No, just your thought in aggregate. In aggregate, the thoughts that go through your brain, the neural synapses that are firing every single second are creating thoughts. Those thoughts, 70 to 80% of the time, are going to be negative. Okay? So now, how often do you think you recycle thoughts? Meaning, how often do you think about the same thought throughout the day? Yeah, 90% of the time. 90% of the time you recycle. So if you're recycling 70 to 80% negative thoughts and you're recycling it 90% of the time, God, Allah, bless us. But that's a lot of negativity in our life, right? So what are these illusions? Thought. We mistakenly believe that every thought we have is true. Think about that. Every thought that crosses our mind, we think it's true. Does that make sense? Does it sound right? Like you delude yourself to think that everything that's going to cross into my mind, Like I know myself better than anybody else does, of course. It's gotta be true. Okay? Yourself. We attach our identity to external labels and achievements. Right? The value that I bring to the world is only the value that can be materially seen in the people around me. My knowledge. We assume we know more than we actually do. All the time. Our time. We live in the past or the future instead of the present. How often do we just not appreciate where we're at? And there was one of my clients, he asked me an important question. He said, Uthman, what would have the 25-year-old Uthman done if he had Rise like my company? And so I really have to think about it to give him an honest answer. And I just go back to one statement that my first manager at Google gave me when I got my first promotion. And he said, and I got it, I was killing myself, right? A year and a half, I had to prove myself, right? I'm like this random Iraqi from the East Coast rolling up to SF, sitting with all these smart Harvard grads and MBA students. I got none of that. So I'm like, I have to prove I have to be like 10 times better than these guys just to get a word out. So I busted my tail to get that first promotion. It took like a year and a half, which was like the fastest they've done. And the first comment that my manager told me when I was leaving that team, and I said, hey, give me real feedback. He said, Uthman, you never appreciate the moment. All you think about is what's next. And he's like, that hurt. Because when I gave you your promotion, the first thing you told me was not thanks, like this is amazing. You didn't celebrate the moment. The first words that came out of your mouth was, how do we get to the next one? I'm like, what kind of jerk is that? Being a manager who's taking people through promotions and stuff, it's hard work, right? Relatively speaking, but he's like, there was a whole team around you that had to make that happen. You didn't even take a second to appreciate everybody else that was in the picture, not even just yourself, or appreciate the moment you're in, but you didn't even appreciate anybody else. You didn't show gratitude. And that stuck with me a lot, where I really had to then reevaluate, what in the world am I chasing? Like, why am I going after this so hard? And it's because I think that I live in the future. I want to see that, million, multi-million. It's going to change every day, right? It's million one day, 10 million the next, 100 million. It's never going to end. You give Bani Adam wadi min dhahab, he's going to want another wadi. He's going to want another valley of gold. We will never be satisfied until the turab is in our mouth, until dust is in, and even then, حتى زرتم المقابر, حتى it encompasses people are still worried about the material world and everything they've accumulated even after they're dead. It doesn't stop. You just want more because you're always living in the future. You're not living in the present. We believe we can control everything, which then leads to frustration when it doesn't happen. Like, I wish I can control the weather. I wish I can control, like, my wife not being tired. I wish I can control my kids not, being annoying at certain times. But that's all my perception of it. If I just change that and say, well, I'm not in control, so how do I just deal with the situation? It makes life very different. And our fear is that it's a perception of danger that's often exaggerated. Right? Because it's trying to save us. But that saving us actually holds us back from being the people that we need to be. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you and I to be. And that's where we stagnate. We become mediocre. We become versions of ourselves that we're not happy with. So what does that mean? All of these thoughts, all of these ideas that cross our mind every single day, a lot of them fall into what we call cognitive distortions. We literally manipulate our mind to think something And that gets us to start acting in the way that we are thinking. So we catastrophize. So if one little thing happens, we make a mountain out of a molehill, right? We catastrophize like one little thing, and we start to say, oh, because I got this negative feedback, or because, Qahwa gave one person gave it a feedback form and said this, the whole program is worthless. There's no way that this thing should keep going. This was a waste of time. So we catastrophize. We mind read, right? When we assume we know what others are thinking or feeling. How many times do you think, like if I'm looking out in the audience, there's all eyes on me. I'm mind reading every single person. This person is bored. This person's like, this is the worst thing. This person, oh, maybe they're actually enjoying it. Maybe they're learning stuff. Mind reading is happening constantly. We're imagining a whole host of things about each other. Negative focus. Again, we're not going to go into that. Control fallacy. We talked about that. The personalization. Everything is about me, and it's my fault. I have to control it. If I don't do this, this event won't work out. Right? If Umar thinks that if he doesn't think of every single thing that can go wrong, this event it's not in his control. Allah's in control, not him. All you can do is what is in your capacity to do, and then the rest is up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We own our truth, right? We all have certain truths about the world. So there's a truth that I have that I'm now pushing onto you. But that's my truth. That's what I believe, and so I'm giving it to you. Either accept it or you don't accept it. But that's the truth that I live by. But that's also a distortion, because I can go so far to say that every other way of living is not acceptable. And so I start to distort myself. Should thinking. Well, the rules should have been, when you have certain rules or expectations, and now things or people should be a certain way because of what you think. Emotional reasoning. Yeah, we believe that we know how you feel is evidence or reflects reality. Overgeneralizing. A single negative event occurs and it reflects everything else like a pattern. Label, whatever. So you got all these things. So the first, just to be practical, and this is where we're going to break out into groups, inshallah. The first thing that I want you to do when you recognize that you're having these thoughts is ask yourself this question: is it true? Is the thought that's crossing your mind true? Are you really worthless? Are you really dumb? Are you really, not able to do X, Y, and Z? Are you not able to take a chance? Ask yourself, is it true? That's the first thing. Then say, can you absolutely know with certainty that it's not true, that it is true, right? Can you factually come up with evidence to then say that that is true? Whatever this thought is that has crossed your mind. What do you do when that thought becomes believable to you? What's your reaction? How do you behave in those moments when you actually believe the thought that crosses your mind, right? That says, you're trying to go and somebody give me an example. Give me an example of a thought that crosses your mind that is in the spectrum of negativity, and it's about maybe doing something, like an action.
If I'm not always busy, then I won't be successful.
If I'm not always busy, I would be successful. Or I won't.
I wouldn't be successful.
Okay. So you have to stay constantly busy, and that's the only thing making you successful. Okay, so then the question is, so how do you react if you believe that thought?
I get stressed and I start doing
More.
things. Yeah.
And if you sit for one day and you don't do anything, you just wasted. You're not going to fail. You basically ruined everything that your parents invested in you.
I'm really going on that mind reading thing.
Yeah. No, but that's a perfect example, right? That's a very simple example of a truth that we tell ourselves that then has real world implications, right? What was my real? I told myself, I can't compare to these other guys at Google. So what did that make me do? Neglect my family, working 16 some hours a day just so that I can get a promotion that tells me that, oh yeah, you are worthy of this, right? You are as smart as these. But guess what I did? It's like, no, now you got to be even smarter. It doesn't stop. It never ends. So catch it and say, what behavior do I add to this thing once I believe it? And then finally, this is the big one. This is the kicker that will transform your life. Who would you be without that thought? Who would you be if you didn't think that if you were always busy, you wouldn't be successful? Who would you be? And that's the question that every time when you catch these thoughts and you actually start writing them down and say, what are you saying to yourself? Just go through these series of questions and you'll be very surprised on what your life could look like if those thoughts were just not believed by you. If you just stopped and paused before you acted on a thought that came to your mind and you reframed it. So how do you reframe it? How do you turn it all around? This is the conclusion of two books that Mo Gaudat said, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told it to us in the Quran very clearly. The first step is that you have to be aware that you're even having these thoughts. You have to be conscious enough of your own thoughts, meaning you're not just running around in life, not thinking about what's crossing your mind, but you sit down and you reflect so that you just find awareness of what is it that you're saying to yourself. What am I thinking? What's crossing my mind? Then you have to be bold. You have to challenge the thought. You have to know that we just now went through a series of reasons why you're having these negative thoughts. Challenge them because they're not all true. The majority of them are going to be wrong because there's no data that backs it up. It's just a fear. It's just a thought. It's an overgeneralization. So challenge those thoughts. And then the best way to do it is to flip it upside down and be grateful of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you. This is why salah is so critical. Because the greatest manifestation of our gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is being able to stand and prostrate to Him. This is why the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he stood in the famous hadith of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, when she saw him standing at night to the point where his body manifested the burden of gratitude that he was holding, and she asked him, why are you doing this? You're completely forgiven, like, take it easy. أَلَا أُحِبُّ أَنْ أَكُونَ عَبْدًا شَكُورًا. Should I not then love to be a grateful servant? The Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam's entire life was about showing gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for every single thing that existed, all the good and all the tests. And people pay billions of dollars. This is billions of dollar industry. What they're teaching people, you know what they're teaching? Just be grateful. لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us constantly in the Quran, if you just show gratitude, Allah will increase you in what you can be grateful for. And yet we neglect Allah and we go to the thing that we believe is materially going to benefit us. Then you're losing both worlds. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. May Allah protect us from that. And I think that's it. Yeah, okay. Alhamdulillah. So, now I think it's group time. I think we have, like, what, 30 minutes?
Yeah, 30 minutes, 45, we need them.
Okay, so we'll get in groups. What do you typically do at once? 5 or 10 people?
We'll say 8, so every roughly 2 rows.
Every
They're like
2
face
rows.
each other and make a group.
Okay, so every 2 rows, get together, and then I'll give you the questions that we
So
discussed.
like reorient your chair so you can face each other.
And if you want to stand up and just stretch out a little bit. Yeah.
Good? Yeah. Leaving already?
You want to
I